And it is after 3:30, and we have an agenda today. And I want to welcome you to this special convocation. I know there's been a great deal of anticipation on what we have been working on and what will be worked on not only in the near future, but for the long term. And so in starting, I want to share with you what our goals for the day are. We, in essence, want to connect the dots. We want you to be able to see the overall plan, and we're going to do that by sharing with you the Cpe presentation that commemorates 10 years of education reform in Kentucky. We're going to talk about the MSU business plan, and we're going to focus on the academic audit process. We have 4 objectives today, and those are to understand the statewide initiatives for higher education and the implications for MSU, which means how all of you fit into this, to understand MSU business plan and, again, the role of everyone at MSU for achieving our goals, to describe the academic audit process, and to answer your questions. Now, I want to take a little side note in this introduction and tell you that when we began this discussion in the Provost Council, one of the first things that was talked about was open process, transparency, communication, and involvement. And at every juncture, we have looked at those as primary goals as we got started. Now, one of the problems with that is you have to have something to communicate. And so we have been working in September and October to begin laying a foundation. And we felt that we were far enough along that it was appropriate to bring everyone together for this special convocation, and that this began the process of inclusion to go forward. Now, I think we're about ready to start with the Cpe presentation. After that is complete, we will move directly into the discussion of the business plan, and President Andrews will come forward at that time to lead that presentation. And so with that, Beth, if you could start the tape. Thank you.
Ten years ago, Kentucky leaders recognized that they must take immediate action to improve the quality of life for Kentucky citizens. The state was trailing the nation in per capita income, as well as high school and college graduation rates.
I hate to admit this, but we were at the bottom, like 49th out of 50 states. It's not acceptable.
Post-secondary education reform in 1997 came from the fact that we'd fallen behind other states. The ability to compete is based on innovation. Innovation is based on education. So if we're going to compete in the global economy, education is foundational.
The leaders of our state in 1997 said, if we're going to achieve certain economic goals, we have got to achieve certain educational goals. It was very unique for a state to actually step back and say, that's what we're trying to accomplish with all this.
For us to make the kind of commitment to higher education and to higher education research that we did is very important.
Well, we had just completed one of the most important elementary and secondary education reforms in the nation, and that is the foundation for the kind of education that you need in today's world. So while you can't live in a foundation, you got to build a house. And I viewed post-secondary education in today's environment as the house on that foundation.
They changed the nature of the conversation about from what do the institutions need to what does the state need, and that's a huge change of focus.
It brought together an incredible number of people with diverse interests from the business community, from the educational community, from the advocacy organizations, and we made fundamental change.
The General Assembly passed the Kentucky Post-Secondary Education Improvement Act of 1997, or House Bill 1. It mandated specific goals.
The General Assembly properly saw a very tight connection
between the general education level of the people of Kentucky and our prosperity, our economic base. And for that reason, they established a fairly specific goal that by the year 2020, we would have the same level of educational attainment within our state as is the national norm.
Another interesting thing that I was very supportive of was the identification of key responsibilities for some of the institutions. The University of Kentucky being the premier research institution, the University of Louisville becoming a premier metro research institution, and identifying each of the regionals with an established center of excellence.
The most high-profile part of it was extracting the community colleges from UK. Looking back now, I know of almost no one who doesn't think that it was the right thing to do.
House Bill 1 built the infrastructure necessary to meet mandated goals, including creating the state's community and technical college system, the Council on Post-Secondary Education, and the Kentucky Virtual University and Library. Additionally, adult education became part of reform efforts in 2000. The Council developed a public agenda with a focus on 5 questions of post-secondary reform and implemented both statewide and institutional performance indicators to track progress.
I think we've made significant progress on the major indicators, the enrollments, degree completion, research and development expenditures, GED, graduation and participation in higher education. The community college system has been a huge success.
There's no question that we've made significant gains, and we have some national prominence in those gains.
I can tell you every day students are affected by the reforms of 1997, whether it be boosting financial aid, increasing access for students, and sending more Kentuckians to college who previously thought they couldn't make it.
One of the great success stories of post-secondary education reform is the Endowment Match Program, commonly known as Bucks for Brains.
There's no question that the Bucks for Brains funding, which is a national model for research funding where we're matching public dollars with private sector dollars, has jump-started the University of Louisville and the University of Kentucky particularly, but also several of the other schools have really worked hard at their research capacity and their ability to attract some of the world's best researchers.
As a Bucks for Brains professor, my work leads to the development of the next generation of scientists and clinicians in the state of Kentucky.
Thanks to the Bucks for Brains program, our research is helping Kentucky doctors in the early identification of child abuse.
We can't obliterate the neglect of 100 years in 10 years, but the better measure of how we have done is what has happened to that educatable population in these 10 years. We have more students entering college, we have more students successfully exiting college. So we've made progress in, I think, every field.
There's no question that House Bill 1 sparked tremendous progress over the past 10 years. But we're really only just getting started.
People brag about reform and how far we've come, but we've still got miles and miles to go before we sleep.
We've got to ramp it up even more. I mean, to get to 2020, the progress we've made in the past has to be accelerated. We've got to double the number of people in the Commonwealth that have a baccalaureate degree.
The Council's statewide business plan details the investments and outcomes needed to double the numbers.
Well, one of the things I think the statewide business plan will attempt to achieve is a higher level of accountability.
We're going to have to improve high school graduation rates. We're going to have to increase and enforce aligning the K-12 standards with those in higher education so that the students are really ready.
We have to make immediate decisions to try to ensure affordability is there and that Kentucky kids can go to school, afford to go to school, and can get the degrees.
It can't be business as usual because there's only 12 and a half years left.
While there is still much work to do, the return on will be monumental.
The Long-Term Policy Research Center of Kentucky recently showed that if we could achieve our goal, then state revenues for our state government and our schools and our structure would go up $9 billion. Per capita income, personal wealth, would go up $140 billion.
Over the course of a person's lifetime, the statistics show a likelihood that he or she will earn about $1 million more as a holder of a bachelor's degree than if that person high level of education have healthier habits. The health indices seem to be much better, and not only that,
of us working together. So we must do everything we can to develop that relationship with the publics and the independents and business and industry, and all of us are going to have to work together to make Kentucky what we want it to be.
It's going to take tremendous leadership on the part of the council staff, on the part of the council, on the part of our elected officials, and on the part of businesses.
The most important role Kentucky business can play is to be investment in education is going to come from people who recognize the benefit and value.
To roll up our sleeves and be a part of that consciousness raising. It's not just the Council on Post-Secondary Education that needs to do it. The Kentucky Chamber of Commerce needs to do it. The governor needs to do it. We all need to be cheerleaders to help change a culture.
there's no real doubt. One that
I apologize for the technical glitch there. I don't know what happened, but the essence of that, the reason we wanted to show that video, I think it captures the essence of what the framework is. I hope what you understand and what I believe, and I think what our commitment is to help the Commonwealth of Kentucky achieve this important goal, which is to have, by the year 2020, the number of adults in the Commonwealth at the national average in terms of baccalaureate degree production. I think it's hugely important that our policy leaders, the executive branch of government, the General Assembly understand that if we can have more people with higher education degrees, the whole standard of living for everybody rises. We know that as educators, but having the public understand that is a challenge, but it's a challenge worthy of our attention. 2.5 years ago, in the spring of 2005, when I started this job here at Morehead State University, I spent the first 6 months going around campus meeting with departments. I started with the academic departments, and then I went to the non-academic departments, and I asked 3 questions. I asked folks what it was that they were most proud of in their department or their unit, what it was in their department or unit that could be improved if there were additional resources to be applied, and what it was that we had in our organization and our systems that were barriers to improvement. And I took a lot of notes. And I hope you've observed that over the course of the last 2.5 years, we've been busy. We, the administration, and we, the campus, us, working on, I think, very appropriate things. But for us as a university community, to move this institution forward to achieve the kind of goals that have been articulated in this video, we've got to do even more. So really what we're here to talk about today is how we can come together as a campus, unified around the proposition that we're committed to helping the Commonwealth achieve these important goals. That's really what this is about. We've put the material out on the campus website. We've asked people to look at it. We have received a number of responses. One response sort of summarizes some things that I want to start with today. This person, and I don't know who it was, said the following. He said, the ideas, your ideas are evident. There's a lot to be digested in the business plan, the work with general education reform, looking at all the academic programs. It appears to be well-intentioned. It appears that there is the potential for success. We need to work cooperatively. Most Morehead State University faculty and staff are working hard right now, and many of us are concerned about our jobs. That's what this thoughtful person said. So let me start by saying this. I believe all those points are valid. The point about being concerned about our jobs, that's really not what this effort is about. This effort is about improving everything that we do to have greater academic excellence at this institution so that our students will be more successful, so that we'll be able to achieve the goals of the Commonwealth. If a person's position is somehow affected in all this work when it's all said and done, my pledge to you is we're going to abide by the university's values. They're stated out there on the website. You can read them. I hope you have. People come first and will be treated with dignity and respect. That's my pledge to you. So put the concern about the pink slips coming out back in your pocket if you've got one of those, because that's really not what we're about. What I'm going to do in my time this afternoon is we're going to go through a presentation on the business plan. Then Dr. Hughes is going to go through a review of the ideas involved in the general education reform effort, and to talk a little bit about the academic audit, talk about calendars. But then we want to have about an hour for questions and answers. And we got some thoughtful comments on the web, and we're going to respond to a few of those to lead into that discussion. I hope you've taken time to read the material, because as the person that I just quoted said, there's a lot to this. This is not a simple subject to ease into when you start talking about a business plan, because most of us are not business people, we're educators. But we've tried to approach our work in a business-like way, because if you observed on that video clip carefully, the word accountability came up many times on there. We are being more and more scrutinized by others from their viewpoint to be more accountable, whatever that means to them. Accountable when they give us money, what are they going to get back? Accountable in terms of the number of students that come to the university, that stay from fall to fall, that graduate in 6 years. Accountable in terms of the number of students that are able to go on into successful careers, and so on and so on. So where I would like to start right now is on the business plan. The business plan really is the culmination of a lot of work that's been going on the campus for some time. We've put the diagram together much as it should be presented. The CPE public policy is what guides the institution. We are a higher education institution in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. We're one of several. And lots of policy is developed there. And we are attending to this public policy. It is in the law of the Commonwealth. This is not something that somebody said you might want to do it. It is in the law. It was written into House Bill 1 in 1997. We have a strategic plan. We completed that last year. It's on the web. It has 6 major goals that have been articulated. You've looked at those. And then in the last year and a half, we have worked carefully. We've developed an enrollment management plan, a technology plan, a diversity plan, a 6-year capital plan, a facility and land use plan, a marketing plan, and now today we're going to talk about this business plan. All of these things are functional elements that enable us as a university to move forward. And then, of course, all this is undergirded by our operating budget, and I'm going to make some comments about the operating budget for the next biennium. The business plan itself is simply a way to organize a number of things. It describes what must happen for this institution to meet this lofty challenge of doubling the numbers. There are real implications for Morehead State University, and the plan tries to articulate those. It also identifies the financial resources necessary for us to achieve those targets. It identifies sources of funds that we will expect to receive, and it talks about the return on investment for the region, for the institution, and importantly for the Commonwealth. Sometimes you wonder what people are thinking about by the comments they make, but it's important for you to know that we have spent a lot of time analyzing the data about our institution. We've learned a lot about who we are through the lens of what does the data tell us we are. And we can talk about that as we go through this or in response to your questions. But we have tried to be very analytical in terms of the history of this institution, the data about our successes, and those areas where we have yet to be as successful as we need to be. In addition to looking at ourselves, we've looked at others. We've looked at institutions within the state, the other comprehensives, and we've also looked at data from the CPE peer institutions, those institutions from across the country against which we examine ourselves regularly. A major task for us that undergirds where we're going is the identification of the gap between where we are today and where we need to be in 2020. Now, it's really important to know, and in case you've glossed over it, what is becoming really apparent is that the policymakers in the Commonwealth at all levels are interested in how many students graduate from the university as opposed to how many students start at the university, right? Hear that really clearly. This is not from Wayne's World. This is from the public policymakers in our state. What people are beginning to say very clearly, it's taken us a while to get there, but very clearly, we don't care so much about the head count coming in. How many students matriculate and go on to graduate, and how long does it take them, and how much does it cost for that student to get through the system? And we have argued, of course, that we're doing a reasonably good job. We're being efficient with our resources, and each institution has some differences, but we have to do that work with quality. This is not a production factory. We're not making widgets. We're helping students learn and become educated in the process. Baccalaureate degree is a key measure. Okay, what's the gap? If you've read the business plan, you know what the gap is. In 2005, we graduated 1,055 students. In 2020, if we do our share of this business plan, we need to graduate 1,799 students, and that leaves us with a production gap, if you will, of 744 students, meaning we're going to need to graduate that many more students by the year 2020, a mere 13 years from now. And I would comment, in an environment where if you know the demographics of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, you know as a state, and particularly in our region, we're not growing in this region. So we've got an uphill battle right there in itself. And in our region, we have many counties, in fact, most of the counties in our service region only see 4 of 10 students graduate from, if you look at a cohort from the 9th grade to the 12th grade. So we're not being Pollyanna about this. We understand very well the demographics of the state, but nonetheless, we still have this challenge. So the undergraduate enrollment a goal here, fall of 2006, 7512. We'd have to move to almost 12,000. It's a pretty good gap there in enrollment. We're going to talk more about this as we get into the plan. There are really 2 primary strategies outlined in this business plan. And they are strategies that can vary considerably in terms of where the emphasis is placed. But the strategies can be identified with 2 key words, growth and productivity. And what we have to decide, and while we've put a stake in the ground in this business plan, we may find as we get into this that we're going to have to adjust the strategies. I'm not suggesting today that because it's written in a document that says planning for greatness, here it is, that's it. This has got to be a living plan. But those are the 2 variables that we have some control over, perhaps one more than the other. We've used a measure of productivity simply as a way to try to understand how we're performing as an institution. This may not be the best measure, but it is a measure. If you take 100 full-time equivalent students and you look to see how many of those students graduate in a given year, per 100 FTE students, you come up with what we're calling a productivity index. And then we can look at how we do versus anybody else we want to look at using a common measure. So the productivity index is simply a way for us to measure a bunch of factors. That has a lot to do with who comes into the university, how they're retained from year to year, and how many graduate coming out at the end of the cycle. All right, just for your comparison on this productivity index, here's Morehead State University. Our productivity index is 16.4 full-time equivalent students per 100 graduate at this institution. And you can see on up, these are our benchmark peers from the Council on Post-Secondary Education. that should be Eastern Washington, not Easter, like Easter Island, Fort Hays State, Western Carolina, but they have a higher productivity index. And you know what? We looked at the funding of those institutions, and there's a direct relationship between productivity and funding. And it's a positive correlate, as you would expect it would be. Notice also that we have included James Madison University here, only because, as you know, I like to brag about our institution. I'm very proud of Morehead State University. We've been recognized the last 4 years as a top regional university in the South. In that cohort of institutions, James Madison is in first place. That's the only reason they're here. I'm not suggesting we can become James Madison or that we want to become James Madison, but they're a pretty good institution. They're located in a different part of the country. They pull students from a different region than we do, but nonetheless, James Madison has a productivity index of 24.7. I can also tell you they graduate, their first-time, full-time, 6-year graduation rate is in excess of 80. Ours this fall is 43. So there's some significant differences. They spend more money on their students per FTE, about $19,000. We spend about $15,000 on ours. So we understand there are differences. But this gives you an idea. You know some of these institutions. Some of you have worked at those institutions, and you know what they are, and you have an idea, of course, what we are. This was simply a way to try to relate in a visual way undergraduate, full-time equivalents and the efficiency index. And the blue line here represents where we are currently. Our efficiency index is just a little greater than 16, and our current undergraduate FTE is about 5,600 students. If we maintain this particular relationship in order to get to the 1,799 baccalaureate degrees by 2020, we would have to increase our enrollment dramatically. You can see also what happens in the red line is where we believe we might get to. If we were a little greater than 22, we can get there with a smaller number of students. In other words, if we increase our efficiency, it requires fewer students to get there. That's all this is intended to show. We went to the data. We looked at where growth is possible. Right now at Morehead State University, our growth is occurring at our regional campuses, and it's occurring online. Like it or not, that's a fact. That's what the data tells us. I don't know if we need to plan all the way into the future with our boat loaded in that direction, but that's the way it is right now. We built the model, though, by making some assumptions. We said if we're going to get there, the main campus would have to grow, the internet portion would have to grow, and each of the regional campuses are going to have to grow. So this was simply a way to say, on a reasonable basis, how could we get there by 2020? We'd have to grow. How much would we grow? On average, about 2%. And these apportionments, by the way, were not just pulled out of the air. Dan Connell and his folks have been doing some planning, and these are actual percentages based on their estimates of what could happen. If you've taken the time to read the strategic plan, you know that the broadly defined plan is referred to as ASPIRE. The strategic level goals in that plan are summarized here by ASPIRE. Academic excellence. I would say to you unabashedly, without any compromise whatsoever, we have to do it well academically. If we don't do it well academically, growing is not worth a flip, okay? So my pledge to you is whatever we do, we've got to do it well academically, so we'll be proud of what we do. There's a lot in the student success, and you know that as well as I do. Student success runs the gamut from enrollment services and how we bring students to the university through admissions, how we administer financial aid, how we treat students in the bursar's office, the student life activities available on campuses, and many, many things. And so I'm not going to comment on all these. You've read about them, but these are the underpinnings in the strategic plan, those 6 key ideas. It's really important that as we go forward with the implementation of the business plan that we understand that there must be both internal and external examination. We can't just look inward, we've got to look out to the world that we serve. We have to target the areas that have greatest potential for improvement. The continuous improvement people talk about picking the low-hanging fruit. Some of it's sitting right in front of our face and we just have to reach up and grab it. Some of it is much more difficult to achieve. And you know what? We have to figure out how to do it. I can't tell you which ones are the low-hanging fruit and which ones are the high-hanging fruit because we're in different parts of the tree. And maybe in the rarefied air where I sit, I'm not seeing anything that you see that needs to be done. So I understand fully that you have huge sway over a lot of this. We have to capitalize on our strengths. We do some things here at this university very well. In fact, I would say at Morehead State University today, we are doing some things at a national level that we should be very proud of. And I won't throw any of those out because I'll leave somebody out, but many of you know what those are. We also have some areas that need to be improved, and many of you would offer those if asked, because you've told me about them. We need to focus on our purpose, and we have to maintain a focus on excellence in student success. If we do that throughout these processes that we have started, we will be successful in the end. I don't want to be Pollyanna about the region we serve. We're in a challenging part of the country. I came to this job because I like big challenges. I was in one for the last 18 years at a Sembly University serving an Appalachian region, and I stayed in the region. I just went a little further northwest. But we have some very needy communities. This Educational Needs Index is done by the Southern Region Education Board. They use 15 factors. It's objective. All we did was take the material out of the report. But what they do is